Alumni from the Communication and Journalism Department to come in and talk to you about what they do and how they got to where they are. And I think it's always illuminating to hear their stories. We have one of these each semester for students who are interested in becoming a COJO major, and I assume that's why you're here, and or some of you were told you get extra credit for here, but that's okay too. I know you'll find these stories to be stimulating and interesting to you. We're going to just have our panelists speak briefly about what they do, and then I would like to open it up for questions, and we might circulate the microphones if we have a few questions for you. Let me introduce our panelists. We have Cecilia Porter on the end here, Marketing and Creative Design Manager for Storm Creek Apparel and a 2015 COJO graduate. We have Caitlin Peterson, Corporate PR and Strategic Communications at Best Buy and a 2015 graduate. Teresa Malloy, National News Editor for Lacana and a 2013 graduate. She's also working on her master's degree in English with an emphasis in literary journalism here at St. Thomas. Rita Kovtun, Communications Coordinator for the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and an excellent photographer, if I do say so, who submits and exhibits her work at various showings, a 2014 graduate. She's also an Instagram star, is that right? Yeah, she's a star of Instagram, so well known. Jonna Schnettler, did I say that right? I hope so. I should have asked. Development Officer for Children's Health, University of Minnesota Foundation, and a 2010 graduate. And then Theodore Palicki, did I say that right, Theodore? Yeah. Is media producer at Palicki Productions and a 2000 graduate. And then down at the end, we have Kelly Sarden Garrity, Program Director for Community Engagement here at the University of St. Thomas and a 1991 graduate. So welcome, and let's start with maybe just sort of a general discussion about how you got where you are, and we'll start with Cece down in the end.
CC, can everyone hear me? CC? Okay.
Do you still go by that? Or?
Yeah. Yeah. Really, anything that sounds like that, I'll probably respond. So I'm a creative design / marketing manager at Storm Creek Apparel. It's a super small apparel company out in Hastings, Minnesota. So you might have heard of us, but maybe not. If what I'm doing is working, you probably have. But the job is kind of a weird mix of marketing, email marketing, web stuff, graphic design, PR, like all kinds of things. So it's really just depends on what the company needs are, and that's kind of the direction it takes. Just because it's a super small company, you kind of get to have your hands in everything. So I majored obviously in communications journalism, but with a focus in advertising copywriting. And then just had a lot of side experience in graphic design, and that's kind of how I came into this role too.
And I'm Caitlin Peterson at Best Buy. I started out at Best Buy a week before I graduated here from St. Thomas as an intern in the public relations department. Actually, a funny story is I applied for a actual full-time permanent position at Best Buy, and they filled it internally. But I was able to get in contact with the PR director, who happens to be a Tommy, so network. And he got me an internship there. I turned into a contract worker a few months later, worked throughout holiday, and now I'm full-time permanent. So yeah, really network with the people that are Tommies, because Tommies really do hire Tommies. Also COJO major like CC, PR, ad, kind of all aligned.
Sort of illustrates the importance of internships, doesn't it? Yeah. Teresa?
I'm a national news editor at Lacana. We are a news outlet that distributes information to 120 different TV stations across the country. So we work directly with CNN. Some days I'm the viral content editor. Other days I am the news manager and football editor on the weekends. So we kind of just roll with the punches. I covered the debate last weekend, so that was really fun. I started out as a local newspaper editor. I worked full time while I was a senior in college, and then I moved to a different newspaper in my company. Then I worked for Bring Me the News as a radio writer and web producer. And I've had a bunch of other freelance jobs in between, magazine editor. I helped coordinate an event at St. Thomas. And yeah, that's how I got to where I am now.
I'm Marita, and I'm a communications coordinator at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, or MCAD. I work within their in-house design studio called DesignWorks. So we do kind of all the print stuff for the school, signage, some external projects. So I'm kind of the project manager for the studio, but my background is in journalism. So I worked for Tommy Media when I was here. And so I write some stories for the alumni magazine as well as the website at MCAD. Kind of how I got there, I actually think what really helped to hire me was that my former boss, when I worked at the business school at St. Thomas, knew the person who was hiring me, so he put in a good word. So again, Tommy connection. But I just want to mention I actually didn't get a job right after I graduated because I wanted to travel. And so, as MOD mentioned, I do photography. So I did some freelancing in photography right after I graduated. Then I went to Costa Rica for 3 months to do like a work exchange. I worked at a chocolate farm in a hostel. So basically, for working a few hours a day, I got to stay there for free, meet a bunch of other volunteers and travelers, and that was a really valuable experience. And actually, when I got hired at MCAD, they talked about how they appreciated that I took the time to do that before getting the job because it kind of made me a more well-rounded candidate. But because I did so much during school, I did a bunch of internships, worked for Tommy Media, like I said. I set myself up for being able to get hired when I did want a full-time job. So.
Jana Schnettler. I am a development officer for Children's Health at the University of Minnesota. I raise money for the University of Minnesota Masonic Children's Hospital, as well as all things mother's health and children's health at the University of Minnesota. So I raise money for research, education, and care. And my background, I was obviously a COJO major here, focused on public relations, and did a minor in English. And through several internship opportunities with local nonprofits, that led me to want to fundraise for great nonprofits in the area. And I actually started raising money for the University of St. Thomas. So I was here for several years after graduating, raising money for the programs and facilities, part of the capital campaign, and then moved on to the University of Minnesota to raise money for pediatrics.
My name is Ted Pollocky. I was a elementary education and communication double major. I actually started out teaching video production at St. Louis Park and then moved to DC where I became a freelance producer, photog, and video editor. And I did a lot of news out there, worked on a couple of presidential elections, worked in a lot of entertainment industry stuff out there. Then moved to Chicago, where I started working on different productions for Food Network, WGN, and then just recently moved back to good old St. Paul and have been working now on we're about to try to launch a new Minneapolis versus St. Paul food show. And so right now we're in post-production, and hopefully we're going to start pitching at the end of this year, and then hopefully we'll get picked up.
Hello, my name is Kelly, and I graduated in 1991. Were people born then? I'm not even sure if we're going way back here. So this is a lot of history, so I'll just take about an hour. Is that okay to just kind of go through my whole life history? Oh boy. At St. Thomas, I started out as a business major, not because I was passionate about business, but my dad was in business, so I thought I'd do that. And I think as I made my way through my time at St. Thomas, the keys were friendships, not just folks who were fun to be around, but people who really asked really great questions about life. And so I was kind of taken by that and really got involved in like the vision trips and VIA, and had some great mentors. and especially in Tom Connery, which I don't know if you folks would have had an opportunity to take a class with Tom Connery, but um, was a major influence of mine. And I thought I wanted to get into magazine investigative reporting, and that's kind of what I shaped my major to be. And but I think as time went on, I realized that I didn't really want to be a writer. I didn't really like writing, so I'm really appreciative I know how to write. But I think what happened was I found my way into through writing and this sort of art of asking questions and bringing out stories, and just found my way into what I consider my own vocation, which has been in higher education, and particularly in working with young people, college age students here for just a year or so, but at other institutions, how to kind of find what's inspiring in a person. And so had a lot of great mentors who really nurtured me in that. So right now I work in community engagement, which is really it's number of professors actually are involved in this. But so in the context of a course, you move into the off-campus community and do a project or participate in a project or an initiative that is usually with a nonprofit organization. And so the learning that can happen when it's done well is really powerful. And that reflects a lot of what my experience was of teachers at St. Thomas, especially Tom Connery. So I think that's a good bit of info for now.
Hello. Okay, there it goes. I think what I always find to be an interesting question would be the one thing that you learned along the way that maybe you might pass on to these students. If, I know there's probably many things you learned, but maybe the one most important thing that you've learned so far. Now, some of you are relatively new graduates, and some of you are uh, relatively older graduates. Nobody's old as me, though, so don't feel too bad about that. But maybe you could muse on that for a moment. Maybe the one most important thing that you a bit of advice or the thing that you've learned. I guess that's it. 'Cause experience is the best teacher. Let's start with Kelly.
Well, let's see. I would say, um, are are you all over as far as seniors, juniors, sophomores? For how many are seniors? Just out of curiosity. So kind of getting ready for job searching. Um, I think one of the great gifts of the education here, at least that I found, and my friends, I think would echo this, is this idea of there's the whatever your major is, so COJO in whatever form, and then there's which is tied in with the liberal arts kind of foundation here. So you get to really focus on something that you think you want to explore and go deeper into, and there's also this opportunity to really just explore anything while you're here. And I know there's that's restricted in a way. You got to get out of here in about 4 years, or you're going to be really in debt. So you want to get out of here and get started with what you want to do. But I think there's so many opportunities here, and what I found, this is true when I was a student, and it's true now as I get to know colleagues in a really different way. Now folks who were teaching me are they're retiring, but they're colleagues essentially and fellow mentors. And I think to get into friend groups and through the opportunities that are available here, and to explore something that might be a little bit out of your comfort zone, um, so that you can get out of what your world is as you've known it. And this might be studying abroad. It might be volunteering with an organization, again, through, here in the Twin Cities, connecting with people who you may not have been exposed to, and trying to find out what are the commonalities, what's something that that they're passionate about. And I think that education that was nurtured through my own affinity group of friends, but then really by mentors, was the best learning that could have happened. So I got the skill of learning how to write through the great courses I was able to participate in, and that I was enrolled in through the COJO. But then also there's this whole learning about people's stories and where they came from, And so I think so that's one thing. And the other thing I'd say real quick is this idea of discernment. I was at Boston College for about 12 years, and in the Jesuit, it's Catholic Jesuit education. There's a whole system, like the Pope is Jesuit, just to put it into perspective a little bit. But there's this idea of discernment, and what I loved about Boston College and the Jesuits, the way they educated, and I think it happens here too, um, is this idea of learning how to discern. So you're not just trying to get a job, but you're trying to get a life. And how do you go deep inside of you to really discover what is it that brings you joy, and what are you good at, and then how do you connect that to what the needs are in the world? And so that was really brought out, I think, started here at St. Thomas and was nurtured by friends and mentors, and certainly by the people I met through so many opportunities. And then that continued. So I think this idea of discernment, like really tapping into what gets me out of bed in the morning. What am I in love with about life, and to kind of have that be a part of you choosing what path you're going to take as far as a career, so to speak. So you're living a vocation. So my hope is that you can find that, and I think it's knowing the folks in this department, the people I do, and have known for many years. It's very well nurtured here, and this place as a whole is for sure too.
All right. Well, I think the my advice would be, this is going to sound kind of cliche, but if you're given different opportunities, don't ever be scared of taking those opportunities. I still remember this one time; it still eats at me sometimes. I just landed a good gig at Bloomberg, and I'd been there maybe a month and a half, and I got a call to work to edit on a Ridley Scott film that was being shot out in D.C., and I kind of squandered the opportunity of it. And I still remember, I got a call late at night, and the guy, he's like, "Oh, we want to talk to you," and blah blah blah. And so I kind of went in, and I still remember he was like, "Oh, we want to bring you on," and I had to weigh, this very lucrative career at Bloomberg versus a 3-month gig, working on this film. And I still remember, and I still kind of, regret not doing that. And I think that, don't be scared of, saying, "Hey, if I really want to do something, this could be super cool." And it would just be, just go for it, because, you're not going to get the opportunity again. And, it's just one of those things where, you never regret the things that you do, because it just, you go and you do it and you learn something from it. But if you don't do it, if you're a little scared to do it and say, "Oh, maybe the timing's not right," or, it's not as much money, you always look back at that. And I mean, I still look back at it, sometimes when I, look at my career and stuff and said, "Oh, what if I went and did that?" And you'll never regret actually doing those things. So,
What was the movie?
oh gosh, it was a Russell Crowe movie, and I can't remember the name, but it wasn't good. So I guess I'm not too sad that I wouldn't work on it.
I think some great advice that I got while I was here from some of my professors, and then I think the longer I've been away and the more that I've tried to help alumni myself, is that to someone's point who mentioned before, that you have an incredible network here at St. Thomas of not only your peers and your great professors, but also alumni, people like us who are out in the field doing various things, doing incredible work, are willing to help you if you're willing to reach out. And I think that if you're an active participant, if you're actively seeking opportunities, whether they be internships with nonprofits, for profits, um, if you are actively seeking out opportunities to sit down with somebody and have a coffee and hear a little bit about what they do, that's going to go miles for you. That will help you kind of figure out what are you passionate about, what are you interested in doing, So I would say use your networks, use your professors outside of the classroom, use alumni like us, reach out to us, come up to us after this and ask for our business card. And I am always more than willing to sit down with students and alums to talk about trying to figure out opportunities. And then my other point, quickly wanted to point out, is to consider the nonprofit world. Carol reached out to me about this great opportunity, and I thought, what do I bring to this kind of social media age? And I'm not, doing journalism, and I'm not doing advertising, but I am incredibly passionate about what I do, and what I learned in the COJO department, I use every single day. I write every day. I pick up the phone. I do speeches. I meet with people face to face. So the skills that you're learning, especially in this department and in your major, are going to take you so far, even if it's not something like advertising and PR. So
So I think my piece of advice would be to step outside your comfort zone as much as you can. There are a lot of great classes in COJO, but there are other opportunities at St. Thomas and even outside that I think personally that I took advantage of that I found were really helpful and kind of helping to expand my worldview and just around me as a person. So Kelly mentioned vision. That's one way to kind of get outside of your comfort zone, and you get to go to a different place, interact with different people, and kind of, do things that aren't typical school things, but you're working in communities, things like that. I also want to mention I double majored in justice and peace studies, and those classes were some of the most, I don't know, eye-opening and just different classes that I hadn't taken anything like that before in high school. And the first class I took in that department just made me really look at the world in a different way and think about things that I'd never been exposed to. So yeah, I would just encourage you to take advantage of those opportunities that maybe they look, a little weird, a little scary. You're not really sure what it's going to be like, or if you're going to fit in. But I think that by doing those things is kind of how you push yourself and really grow.
Something that helped me a lot from St. Thomas in my field has been the ethics course and having conversations in classrooms about what's okay to publish, what's not okay to publish. I don't know if you guys heard, but one of our presidential candidates had a controversial video come out. And so we had a conversation on whether or not we should censor some words. And we have family member stations, and they did not want some of those words on their website, but we had CNN telling us, oh, yeah, it's okay to put those words on a website. I've been in situations where I've been an investigative reporter, and I've had to deal with a lot of ethical situations. So it's nice to have that backing, but especially in the journalism industry, it is such a team building field. I have worked with so many people, and one of the biggest parts of my job is breaking news. And you have to rely on our team of 6 people to get news out to millions of people and get it right and get it accurate. So that was one of the skills that I learned from being on Tommy Media, even being in classrooms, doing projects. This is a field where you need to learn how to work together and to really hold strong to your values. So that was something that I learned here.
Going back to your network, honestly, it's the most important thing. Don't forget the people that you meet along the way. If it's someone you meet at a networking event or even someone you just run into, I worked at J. Crew in college and I met a great connection at Cole McFoy. Like, what are the chances? So, meeting with people and keeping those connections, stay in contact. You get a business card, don't just put it in a pile. If you're actually interested in what they do and you want to know more, reach out to them because, like she said, they're so willing to help you, especially if they're a Tommy. Tommies love going back to other Tommies and helping them along the way.
That note too, not just for networks, but really like asking for what you want is super important because no one's just gonna hand it to you, whether it's like a job title or an interview or something. If you're really truly interested in a company, then don't wait for a job posting to come up. Like email the jobs at or whoever that you can find on the website that's in that field that you're interested in, and just be like, I'm really interested in this. I'm still in school, just want to learn about this, see what my options are, and just go in and talk to them. And most people are really interested in actually helping out. And then I think, like, I used to write for a blog that was for like EDM shows. It was like a concert venue. But the way that happened was I went on Facebook and just messaged all these different companies, basically saying what I do, what I'm interested in. I really like music, blah, blah, blah. And it ended up coming back that way, like seriously through Facebook Messenger. So if you figure out like where these companies are present, and then what their needs might be, there's really no job listing or anything for it. So, but if they need help and you need experience and you don't mind, writing a couple stories without getting paid for it, or maybe they'll toss you free shows or something like that. But just really get out there and ask for what you're looking for and show interest, and it will come back to you.
I don't know if everybody wants to address this question or not, but what Cecilia said got me thinking about the value of a portfolio, and perhaps some of you have ideas or advice on portfolio building and how to go about it, and where you can get information for your portfolio. And
Giving it to me. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. So when you're in, television or video or film, yeah, definitely your reel speaks for itself. So you definitely want to kill a reel. And nowadays it's so easy to put something together because everybody's can has access to an editing system and a nice camera. I remember back in the day it was to have an Avid program. You had to have like a $10,000 computer and you had to spend hours down in the editing booth and stuff. But I think, yeah, definitely just do a lot of stuff and pick your best stuff and try to get into different places via internships and stuff like that to really showcase your work. But yeah, I think just get a lot of stuff and learn from each project you do. And even if it's you just volunteering your time to do a PSA for a nonprofit, or just an informational video for somebody that has a small company or something like that, just to get more experience. Because me being able to see someone coming fresh out of college versus somebody that's been in for a while, and to have you know a really good reel of a lot of stuff, I think is really important.
Ted, you've been in the business for some years now. How much stuff would you throw out, and how much would you keep for your portfolio?
Well, I still, I remember the one thing is I kept every single project that I have ever done. I still have it on, it's all, consolidated onto a OneDrive now. But yeah, well, if you do a demo reel, I would say that if I'm looking at it, I'll probably watch maybe a minute and a half to 2 minutes, and then go back and look at, if you make that first minute and a half, 2 minute cut, then, I'll go back and watch the whole thing to narrow it down, because, I'll get something like, 15 or 20 demo reels. I'm not going to sit and watch a 5 minute demo reel for, 25 people. So you got to really make it shine in that minute, minute and a half, because that's all the time that, people are going to have to give. So just, I mean, really come out flaring with it.
Rita, you probably have some things to say about portfolio building, don't you?
So for someone like me, I kind of did a lot of different things. I did writing, photography, video, and so I guess I'm actually still in the process of making my portfolio website. But I've kept everything that I've done in the past, and when I've applied to jobs, I've just kind of put together, like links into an email. Um, but there's websites like Squarespace or Wix that are, some of them have fees, some are free. WordPress. And if you have a lot of stuff, I think that it is a good idea to create a website for yourself and make it sortable, by the kind of things you do. So you have like a page for your articles that you've written, page for photography, maybe you do some design, things like that.
And we had the experience, though, also of if you work for another organization such as Tommy Media and you take pictures, don't count on Tommy Media keeping those pictures where you can get at them. We had the experience where we had trouble finding good high resolution copies of some of your work that you wanted for another purpose. So you want to keep your own file somewhere, even if you have to buy your own disk drive. Teresa, you probably have a extensive portfolio for your business.
I do. I have a Google Doc that has every story, video, photo I've ever published. It's very long. I've had that issue too, where sometimes the website shuts down, so save your work. But one of the things that I am always surprised about, which is going to sound really stupid, is sometimes I forget that people actually read my work. We post a story and you get thousands of views. And so what I've encountered is that people are watching your move. A lot of times I'll go to newsrooms and they'll be like, oh, yeah, I know who you are. I've seen your byline. I've read your story. And you're like, oh, my gosh, what did they read? I did 20 stories today. I've done 100 in the past month. Like, what are they looking at? But people pay attention to you, and so be very intentional and about the work that you're putting out there.
What about in the public relations field that you're in? Did you have a portfolio that you prepared before you got your jobs?
I would say I had writing samples, if that you consider that the portfolio. Always have at least 2 or 3 really killer writing samples because you're going to need them for almost anything. Anything you go into, PR, ad, for copy, anything you go into. Now I would say I have a bigger portfolio as I write for the corporate blog and I write internally, and we also publish a magazine that I'm a main author for. So now I have a pretty extensive blog, or a pretty extensive portfolio, but writing based.
John, do you review portfolios or review resumes from job applicants?
Yes.
What sort of things do you look for?
So resumes. My comment to a portfolio is some opportunities that you're looking for don't require a portfolio, but your resume is critically important, because if you think about it, this is a piece of paper that you send off usually now online to somebody, and they are weeding through thousands, hundreds of thousands of these pages. And how can you differentiate yourself um, in a way that's going to catch their eye? Because using a standard template now these days from online that you Google is not usually going to cut it unless you have um, a personal connection to this place. But I do review resumes and am part of the interview process for some applicants at the University of Minnesota. And again, really looking at what differentiates somebody. What have they done that's gone above and beyond? And this is beyond service projects and all of that. Really thinking outside of the box and being creative and being active in many opportunities that, to Rita's point about being involved in things here on campus and off campus, and really showcasing the work that you're doing regardless of what area you're in, can really distinguish you from other applicants and resumes.
Cece, you were interested in graphic design when you were here, and you did that. Do you have any tips for those who might be interested in graphic design for building a portfolio?
Definitely. And I actually just hired an intern for graphic design too. So I got to look at a lot of resumes and portfolios and things. So now I can tell you all my pet peeves. Um, but definitely have an online portfolio. I think one of the most impressive things I saw while hiring too was a physical one. So actually like getting a small book printed with like your very top samples that you have, or campaigns if it's advertising. If you are doing advertising copywriting, definitely make it visually impactful too. Like if say you're not that good at graphic design, but you worked on a team with something, or you have a friend who does, like figure out a way to really show your campaigns off. Um, and then for an online portfolio, I would say like I did it kind of in a blog site. So each like infographic or logo set or anything I made is on the blog, but then there's actually like a work page that has those top 3 really killer samples. So if someone just wants to see my best work, I'll just send them a link to that. And then for graphic design, it's super important to reflect that in your resume too. So when we were hiring this intern, any resume that really didn't have any pizzazz or it was kind of that templated design, it was automatically kind of thrown out because it's kind of like, well, if you're not going to market yourself, how are you going to present that for this company? So I think really showing in a creative way, whether it's icons for the programs that you know really well, or one thing I saw recently for social media was putting your kind of intent paragraph in a little tweet box. So it's under 140 characters. And if you're about to go for a social media job, that's super important to be able to tell a story in a very small snippet concisely. So I think just being mindful of what the job is that you're going for and really presenting that in every facet that you're sending off to this hiring manager, whether it's a cover letter or resume or portfolio, making sure it's easy to understand and shows what you do, no matter what they look at first.
Kelly, you've been away from St. Thomas as a student. I mean, you're back as as somebody who works here now, uh, and about 15, 16 years out of school. Do you still work on your resume, or how important is that to you to keep that going?
Yes, I think it is really important, and because I just started here like a year and some ago after being at another institute at Boston College for like 12 years. So um, so after 12 years, I was, I hadn't done a resume. I hadn't looked at my resume in that amount of time. So I realized, and I think, with um, networking changed as well, not the people necessarily, but I hadn't been keeping up with my network. I hadn't been being really intentional about fostering a network in that time, really. Um, and then things emerged like LinkedIn. And so I think, um, especially in this day and age, it's probably less, and maybe this isn't even the desire of a number of you now to have a job for 12 years at the same place. Um, so I think it's really important to keep up, certainly a resume, and I would say too to figure out how to nurture your network and and to be really, I think this was brought up too, to be really bold about um, you know, getting in front of people who can be helpful in making connections. And I think that can happen with anybody. Like the examples that were used. You have a job in college at J. Crew, or and then you happen to meet someone, and that's how a lot of these opportunities come. But I think you can also be really intentional about doing that. And so one thing that I did, and I think trying to be creative in line with what you're trying to do, because it's for many of these jobs, I think the element of creativity is really important, and not just for copywriting, account executives, folks who work in development. Um, so I think that being able to express yourself creatively is really helpful, and you can build a little group around you to help you with that, to give you feedback. And there's an example, I was just thinking of this. This was a long time ago because I did work in publishing for 2 years. Almost forgot it was so long ago, but in for a couple of magazines, and I really was thinking, oh, I want to be a publisher of a magazine at some point. And so I had it in my mind that I really wanted to meet the president of there are many publications that this president's company, sponsored, and so he would come into town pretty rarely, and so I wanted to be ready when he did come into town. And so I requested a meeting with him through our publisher, who I'd gotten to know, and had a meeting, and was just asking them questions, both the president and the publisher, just about how do you get into this kind of work, publishing, what kind of qualities. And this is probably why I got out of publishing, but one of the qualities that our publisher mentioned in that meeting was, you got to be ruthless. I was like, I don't want to be ruthless, but all right, if I got to get a job. So I remembered that, and I remember our publisher had a little rubber shark, like a great white shark with its mouth open. It's kind of symbol of the kind of person, I think, her approach to running a business, essentially, and being in publishing. And so, so to follow up the meeting, what I did was I took a copy of the magazine that we were working on, and I put like bite marks out of the corner of it, and then I put in the corner, I put shark attack, and then I inserted my resume in there. And so I was just thinking, like as folks are talking, how do you really make yourself stand out? And to be ready for that to happen when a great opportunity comes up or you decide you want to try something different, to have your resume ready, to have a few ideas about what your next move is going to be and how you might be able to really make an impression.
I think it's really important today with kind of the unease and unsettled nature of the communication business, especially where you have legacy media on the way out and new media coming in. And I wanted to start with Caitlin on this one, and in the interest of full disclosure, talk about the toughest part of your job a little bit.
So I would say the toughest part of my job, I'll do one internal communications and one PR side because I'm focused more on internal now. But last holiday, when I was on the PR side at Best Buy, media want to get into your stores for Best Buy. They want to get into your stores regardless if it's about your store or not. So Black Friday specifically, people don't like that stores are open on Black Friday, quite frankly. And we are open on Black Friday and pretty early on Black Friday. And they want to get into your stores, and you have to say you can't come into our stores unless it's for a specific Best Buy related purpose. And I think really pushing back on those really important relationships you build with that media partner, because we each have our own little section of the country where you own that media, so you have those good relationships, and politely putting ideas down or stories down but still keeping that relationship is a tightrope to walk. Internally, kind of the same thing. Business partners they kind of pitch stories to me, so I'm kind of on the other side now, and putting them down and kind of deciding what's more important for the company-wide versus, sometimes a business partner thinks that their story is the most important thing, and when it's not, you have to politely put them down.
So we've been hearing about how those interpersonal relationships are so important, and then they're also difficult to maintain if you're in a business situation. Teresa, what's the toughest part of your job?
Currently, I think the toughest part of my job has been the content of what we're covering. It's very difficult with the election, but I've also had to cover a lot of mass shootings, and that's really tough. We do a lot of world news and national news, so sometimes you go home and you're like, oh my gosh, the world's going to explode. But you have to understand that there's a lot of good news out there too. We are a very fast-paced news organization, so we don't always put the stories out there that I think need to be told. So that's why I am doing my master's at St. Thomas. I'm studying literary journalism, and I'm working on some reporting on my own in North Minneapolis and stuff. So there are other opportunities, but it's really hard with this fast-paced, social media-driven world. There's a lot of pressure to tell a story and move on, and readers can get information anywhere. So how are we going to make ours better and smarter and more reliable? And it's hard to do, under a time crunch.
Jana, you work in the health industry to some extent, correct?
Yes.
And that probably has its own special problems. I believe it or not, many of you will go into the health industry because there's a lot of jobs to be done there. So maybe you could address that a little bit. Some of the tough things about working in health.
Absolutely. Well, as you can imagine, the political arena and healthcare is ever changing, and it will likely change again in November, and that shifts your focus. And so, regardless of what you're in, for me, I raise money for the Children's Hospital and for research and education, and healthcare is ever changing, and so we have to be adaptable. And I think that that's across the board here, that you have to be adaptable in this work. Because overnight things change, technology changes, and the scope changes, and so I would say that, yeah, a great challenge of what we do, especially in healthcare, is being able to adapt quickly, and to continue to provide exceptional care. And I think that something to think about too is, there's so many different fields that you can go into. But again, with communications and journalism as a background, it is so broad, and people, and companies and nonprofits are looking for people who have incredible communication skills to be a part of their team. Um, just at the foundation alone, we have fundraisers, but then we also have a communications and marketing group. And we have people who are researchers, and we have people who do all sorts of different things. And so, if you're adaptable and you use those skills, you can find something that will really fit what you're looking for.
You know, I spent some time working at the Pioneer Press, and I know three reporters who segued into the health industry from being news reporters into doing all kinds of things for the health industry. We have Cece, who works for a very small company, so I'm interested in hearing what's the tough part about working for a small company.
Um, there's a lot. So I guess the biggest thing about being at a small company is that there's only so many people and there's a ton of stuff to do. So like Storm Creek is only 20 people. I'm my boss is the CEO. And so anything marketing, graphic design, PR, website stuff, and all of that would come down to me and then now my intern, thank God. But it's kind of crazy because it's really not just, I guess, for apparel, it's not just, selling something to a consumer, but you have a lot of business partners like retailers, you have your own sales reps, you have a lot of different segments that you're supplying materials to or that you're making sure your website works for. And, there's a lot of different parts of a business that you might not know if you're at a larger company. So that's kind of a benefit of being at a small company is being able to learn and understand all these different parts and get a ton of experience, and to have a voice in a lot of those parts too, and learning kind of how to be strategic in every part of a business. But it's a big load to bear. But if you are kind of able to have those conversations with people and to be strategic and to step back and look at the bigger picture and timelines and everyone's capacity, then it is a super great learning experience too.
Ted, I think that a lot of people are going to be interested in hearing about going out on your own and doing your own thing, and maybe you could talk about some of the difficulties. And I know it's rewarding, but it's difficult too, right?
Yeah, I mean, probably the most difficult thing is, just trying to continuing to find work and, market yourself, and, because it's not always so steady, and you got to kind of ride the waves up and down. But uh, there's, and I'm just thinking back to my news days where I would be in, at a suite with, some news people and having to deal with their egos, and being butting heads with these people all the time. And I recall a few times where things get heated because you're on deadline and stuff. And at the end of every session producing editing, I would always have a firm handshake for the person, as much as I wanted to punch them out, and just it's like the entourage, hey, let's hug it out at the end, because we got to come back and do it again tomorrow or do it again the next day. And I think that was one of the things where no matter how heated and how time crunch you get, you're going to have to come back and work with this person. And it's just the interpersonal communications that you got to deal with, these people, especially in TV and news. It's just there's people with a lot of big egos, and you got to be able to work with them, and just at the end of the day let it go, and firm handshake, and come back tomorrow with a fresh new start.
I learned that the hard way when I worked in Chicago at the Chicago Tribune. That you couldn't take any of that personally either. You know, it was their writing you were dealing with, or their pictures you were dealing with,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of ownership attached to that, and you've got to, and that's part of being a good teammate, is knowing when to insist and when not to insist.
Right, exactly. You know, and if you have especially if you have a creative difference, then, you know, say the producer or, you know, whoever it is, it's just, you know, you have to pick your battles sometime to figure out, you know, when to give up your creative, you know, instinct and, you know, just kind of let it go.
What about Kelly, coming back to a place that you've been away from? What was tough about that? Because I know some of the people in this room will eventually find their way back here, or if not here, they'll find their way back someplace else where they've been before. And what's tough about that?
Well, I think I left after graduating here, so I was gone for 20 years or so, and I think the hardest part, um, it's been less coming back and more the leaving, because I think when I was in school, this is kind of where my network was starting to build. I grew up in the area, as well, and then through internships here, was able to make some connections and start to get a sense as to what, you know, what it was like here as far as the journalism scene, and what I was going to explore, and with the Tommy connection too. So when I left, I traveled for a while and ended up in Seattle, and that's where I got my first publishing job, and I didn't know anybody, so that piece was hard, much more so than coming back here now. I would say the coming back has been good, and I've been much more intentional about, even before coming, you know, reconnecting with people, who I hadn't maybe talked to in a long time. But I think that moving around a lot can be difficult, just because then you got to kind of start over again. Um, but that being said, it was really good to go away, because I think now that I'm here, there's a lot of experience I can bring from a lot of different places and many different people, you know, met through a lot of different experiences. So there's, you know, yeah. As far as professionally, I think trying to go with the flow with what's already been developed can be really beneficial. Um,
Now, some of us have been away from college longer than others, and the thing that we've discovered probably is that you will move around a lot, and that can be, I think, for me, has been the one toughest thing, is that you know, living in Davenport, Iowa, then Chicago, and then Iowa, and then back up here again. I imagine that you younger people will find, by the time you're 15, 20 years out, you've got 2 or 3 moves under your belt. It's just the nature of the game. We have a little bit of time left. Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask? I'll come out and provide a microphone if you do. Back here.
Hello, my name's Keely Gregory. I'm actually an international student. I'm from Australia. My question would be to like anybody is what has been one of your biggest setbacks and what did you do to turn it around?
No setbacks, huh?
I'll say that I had a big setback early in my career. I was excited to graduate and had a job and was working full time, and I got laid off almost immediately because there were budget cuts. So I got to really experience what the news industry is like. I was luckily moved to a different newspaper within my company, but pretty much every news organization that I've worked with in the past 3 years has suffered from budget cuts and layoffs. So it's kind of a tough reality to deal with. I'm on the plus side, you get to do a lot of work and learn from it. So
Could have just stayed there. Sorry.
Hi. Ooh, hi. I'm Hannah. I am a junior here, COJO major. If there's one class that you're super thankful that you took while you were at St. Thomas, what class would it be and why?
So I took a multicultural communications class during J term, and it was in Hawaii. And I would think that was probably one of my greatest classes that I've ever taken. And it was funny. This is one of my favorite stories to tell about Dr. Sauter. Is one morning we got up at 5:30 and decided we were going to go surf. At 5:30 in the morning, Dr. Sauter and I out on Waikiki Beach, and it was just it was just fantastic. And but that, if it's still going on, I don't know if it's still going on. Oh, is it?
Going on, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The
Not-
best class at St. Thomas.
Yeah, I don't
28
think
days in Hawaii. And I mean, not just being in Hawaii, but I mean, there was just so many amazing experiences that we had, via the surfing or hiking, or we went to this one island with the school. What was the name of that? Sa- yeah. And it was just, I mean, yeah, it was an incredible, incredible experience. So definitely recommended.
I also recommend it. Great J term. You come back with a nice tan and a lot of knowledge. Honestly say the most beneficial class I took, COJO, ethics, hands down. You use it all the time once you're out of college. Seems like a ton of work when you're in it, but it's definitely very useful.
Yeah, ethics, big time. I think some of the other really important classes I took were actually Dr. G's, where you learn about race, class, gender, society, media, and you write these huge long papers that seem like they take forever, but it's so worth it. Really diving into a subject and learning how to think critically. And then when you add ethics on top of that, it's not just, the race, class, gender, but really any side of an argument in any field of communication, you really have to consider all stakeholders, and that's the class where you really learn how to kind of decide how to strategically think about a problem.
the thing that a lot of students that I advise come in thinking is that skills courses are so important because they have to prepare themselves for not everything. But then when we have these panels, the alumni are always mentioning things like race, class, and gender, the ethics course, those kind of courses that make you think critically, make you look at society in a different way as being very important. I know Rita mentioned her peace and justice studies classes as being very important too. Those are the courses that really open your eyes to what's going on in the world and make you the kind of person who, when they have skills, can go out and ask the right questions and write the right stories, tell the right stories. Maybe one more question. Anybody got their hand up here? I'm not looking at everybody.
Hi, my name's Jennifer. I'm a sophomore here. My question's kind of for you. I was just wondering how you got involved in such a small company.
While I was in college, I actually interned for Finnegan's Brew Company as their communications, graphic design intern, they call it. It was partially a way to get free beer every week, but also it was a nonprofit and it was actually something that I cared about. So um, that was the first really small company that I worked for. And then right out of school, I started working at Ecolab in their external communications department, which is where you're doing PR and social media and working with like the Wall Street Journal and huge company, um, where you dress up every single day and you're talking to people across the globe. And the corporate thing just really wasn't for me. So that's when I decided I want to find a smaller company again, and then that's in an industry that I'm interested in and care about. And so Storm Creek is outdoor apparel, so it's super fun industry. And then they also do a lot of events and things that give back too. So it's just kind of a combination of interests and the type of company that you feel comfortable working for, and a cause driven thing.
I want our panelists to raise their hand if they think internships are important. Yeah. And so you want to line yourself up as soon as you can to take internships and get out there and meet people and get those experiences and those resume building things early on in your career. All right, well, thank you very much. This has been great. I always find it very stimulating, and if we could have a little applause for our panelists. And thank you for coming tonight.